Who dueled another musician and almost died were it not for a metal button on their overcoat? Well, today I want to tell you about a German/English composer by the name of George Friedrich Handel. Handel was born in Germany in 1685. His father was a barber and a surgeon, and he did not, under any circumstances at all, ever want his son to go and be a musician, because that was bad, very bad. And so he had already decided his son was going to go into law. Now, the story goes that Handel's musical talent could just not be contained. He loved it so much. Now, he was smart and he was pretending to study law. But secretly at night, when his father was asleep, he would creep up to the attic. And there was a clavichord there in the attic. Not sure what it was doing there. And Handel would practice so quietly that it didn't wake his father up. And he played hours and hours and hours at night. Now, one day, little George, he accompanied his father to a noble court of the Duke of Saxe-Weissenfels. Now, and he's like, hey, can you play some clavichord? And Handel's like, sure. And the Duke was so impressed. He's like, whoa! So the Duke's like, Dad, you need to give him musical lessons. He's like, no, my son's going to go into law. Music is not reliable. It's not a good source of income, and it's, musicians. Well, he eventually talked his father into it, the Duke, not George himself. And there was a stipulation, yes, I will let you study music, but you cannot stop your general studies. So for a while, he's studying law, but he's also studying music, and at the same time, he has now already become the organist of the town. So he'd been studying harpsichord, organ, violin as well, and when he was 18, he moved to Hamburg, because that's where the big music place was in Germany. While there in Hamburg, at one point, he had a heated argument with a composer by the name of Madison, and it got really bad, and they decided they were going to duel it out. So that they did. They got their swords, they went out on the streets, and they dueled it out. And Madison was going to get right into him, but there was a big metal button on the outside of George Handel's suit jacket, whatever, and it saved his life because the sword couldn't go through there. They did eventually reconcile. I'm glad they weren't dead. He started dabbling in composition himself, and he realized quickly that Hamburg only had so much to offer, and if he really wanted to do more, he was going to have to move. So up and moving he did. He went to Italy and studied operas there, which were the whole rage, and he became very good. His operas, his cantatas, his sacred work, well, people all over Europe loved them, and pretty soon he was offered a position of Kapellmeister in Hanover, and he accepted it, but pretty quickly after he got there, he actually requested a leave so that he could go to England instead. Now, this decision absolutely changed his life forever, and he became a British citizen in 1727, and he started writing many more operas there, mostly in Italian in the beginning, and people loved it. Actually, not only did they love it, he dominated the London musical life. He wrote over 40 operas, but not only did he write it, he ran production companies, he ran the opera companies, he managed the singers, he conducted the performances mostly himself, and he continued to compose under all this pressure. He just never stopped. He was good, but there was a little problem. He had perfect pitch, which doesn't have to be a problem, but it made him very demanding. If a singer was off, the end. The people that were playing for him, they would have to come in early, and they all had to tune together and make sure that their instruments were perfectly pitched before he would ever come in, or he would just fly into a rage if the music was just off even a bit. There's a story that one time all the musicians had come in early, they had tuned, they ran out to get something to drink before he came in, and some guy came in and snuck and untuned all their instruments. While they start working, Handel comes in, puts his hands up, and it sounds like a cacophony. He gets so angry, he rips his wig off and tears it apart and goes advances the musicians with his fists up in the air. Now, at some point, the Italian operas, they kind of go out of style there in England. People are like, we don't know what's going on. We can't understand it. He goes, no problem. I can switch. And he starts writing these sacred arias, which is not staged. Like an opera is staged. It's just people singing a story instead of telling a story. Then in 1741, in only 24 days, he writes the entire Messiah, Handel's Messiah, which is just a story taken directly from the Bible put to music. When the Hallelujah chorus hit, King George was so moved, He couldn't hold back and didn't know what to do with himself, so he just stood up, which meant the entire audience stood up. And to this day, many times, entire audiences will stand up during the Hallelujah chorus because of that. Despite all his great success and his fiery personality, his health was not always really great. And maybe because of it, he ended up having a stroke pretty early on in the 30s. And for a while, he couldn't use his right arm at all. But he recovered, and a full recovery, and continued to compose and continued to direct. He, over time, developed severe eye problems and eventually ended up completely blind. When that happened, he would dictate the music and compose that way. People look back and think of him as like this fiery, crazy guy, maybe not so great, but fiery. But he was very passionate, and he was also very generous. And he began this really great tradition of musicians helping those around them. He often donated the proceeds from the Messiah performances to the foundling hospitals in London, helping these children that had no parents at all. He himself never married, so he also never had any children. He devoted his life completely to music, but he did help those around him when he could, which is great. He devoted his life completely to music, to composition, to performance, but also to public service. He's described as stubborn. He's described as intimidating. He's described as forceful, but also those people that were close to him. They recognized his loyalty, they recognized his humor, and his deep compassion for other people. It wasn't all about himself. In 1759, he passed away in London at the age of 74. He was granted the extraordinary honor of a burial in Westminster Abbey. This is a true recognition of his status, not just as a composer, but also as a national treasure. He might be one of defiance. He had to defy his father. He had to defy different illnesses. He had to defy changing public music taste. He triumphed, and he was purely genius. We still love his music today. Go and listen to some George Friedrich Handel.